Hello, friends, lovers,
Hello.
freethinkers. That's right, get your free thought right here. It is Happy Freethinkers Day. Thank you for joining us. This is 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir for Sunday, January 29th, 2023. I'm Robert Nasir. I'm joined by Amy Nasir, and you know who you are. At least I hope that you do. And I hope we see you in the chat, either on YouTube or Facebook. We will certainly monitor both of those. There we go. And again, today is Sunday, January 29th. It's almost the end of the month. I hope January was good for you. If not, I hope you make the next 2 days fantastic. This is the 29th day of the year. There are 336 days. 336 days left to make 2023 your best year yet.
You know, that's a lot of opportunity.
That's a lot of opportunity.
Yay! Let's be optimistic.
Except time travel is in one direction only. There's no rewind button. So definitely remember, this is not a dress rehearsal. We'll get back to that. 330 days until Christmas. Some of our neighbors already have their Christmas lights up for this year. It's the most amazing thing.
I know, it's pretty amazing that they're celebrating 11 months early.
Apparently so. 275 days until Halloween and just 16 days. 2 weeks, 2 days until Valentine's Day.
Woo!
So hope you're looking forward to that. Planning something special for your Valentine. If you don't have a Valentine this year, for your friends, your family, your son, your daughter, your mother, your dog, whoever that special person's going to be for you. And on this date, January 29th, once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." I won't read the rest of The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, but it was published on this date in 1845.
Seems like an appropriately dreary day.
It is a dreary, dreary poem, but it is so well written. I usually say it's okay if art takes you to dark places as long as it doesn't leave you there. The curious thing about a poem like The Raven is it kind of leaves you there, but at the same time it's so well written that you appreciate the artistry of the great Edgar Allan Poe. In 1927, Poe self-published a collection of poems. 6 years later, his short story, Emma's Found in a Bottle, won $50 in a story contest. I'm guessing $50 was a lot of money in 1827. The story of Edgar Allan Poe to me is fascinating. I won't read the whole thing, but if you've never actually read The Raven all the way through, I do recommend it. Again, it's dark, it's sad. It makes you wonder what happened to Lenore and how sad it is that she is. But it's so well written. Good stuff. In fact, the essay I was reading, his macabre work often portraying motiveless crimes and intolerable guilt that induces growing mania in his characters. There's a yearly reading at Halloween of The Telltale Heart.
Yes, by our beautiful and wonderful actor Anthony Lucas.
Yes.
From our wonderful Greenfield village.
And that is absolutely intolerable guilt that induces a growing mania in the character. And Tony is brilliant at presenting that.
Oh, he's so good.
The article
so
says
good.
that was a significant influence on such European writers as Charles Baudelaire and even Dostoevsky. So, Edgar Allan Poe. Anniversary of that poem being published. Also, January 29th is the day that Dr. Strangelove appeared. This was the premiere in 1964. And I've got to admit, I don't think I've seen the film. I still haven't seen Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I got to make that happen. And I'll watch the chat here because I know somebody's going to tell me, "How dare you?" or words to that effect. So yes, I still need to see Dr. Strangelove. We've got some serious Stanley Kubrick fans in the audience, and so I know that is absolutely scandalous. I was talking to Amy about it earlier. You said you thought you have seen it, but you didn't care for it.
Yeah, this was way back when, another time, another dimension, another galaxy.
Yeah,
and,
back in 1964, 9 years before you were born.
Remember that it wasn't It was not particularly satisfying to watch, and it wasn't particularly funny, and it seemed rather cynical, even for me at the time when I was a punk rocker.
For Peter Sellers, you've got to have a high tolerance for cynical.
Yeah.
It's very funny if you can get past that. So yes, it is on my to-watch list, and I will make that happen. Paulo Zeus says, I think I studied The Raven in school and did an essay. I'm sure that was the first time I ever read it all the way through. Poe was appreciated in school, even though Jennifer Lionberger points out he was not appreciated in his time. It's true, he did make a living, but he wasn't a wealthy man based on his writing. But just like now, he had his fans. Also, January 29th is National Puzzle Day. And that was interesting to look up because it turns out jigsaw puzzles as we know them today were invented or created by John Spilsbury, who was, some of you will know this story, he was a cartographer, a map maker. And that to me is interesting. He called them dissected maps, which is interesting. He created his first puzzle in 1766 as an educational tool to teach geography. See, that makes sense. Give somebody all of the countries separated out like a jigsaw puzzle, figure out where they go. He affixed a world map to wood, carved each country out to create the first puzzle, sensing a business opportunity. See, this is the cool part. He created puzzles on 8 themes: the world, Europe, Asia, Africa, America, England, and Wales, Ireland, and Scotland. Very cool. Love that story. So, if you have a jigsaw puzzle handy, and I've got a couple of them we haven't done yet, now's the time. Dig them out tonight. Set them down on a table. It's one of those things that I love to do, but I never think to do it.
Yeah, I think about it, but then later on I forget about it.
Yeah.
I got a plan.
And when you get into them, they're great fun.
Yes.
I've been doing the easy way out, the cheater's way, which is doing online digital jigsaw puzzles. And the problem with the jigsaw puzzle website that I've used is all of the pieces are right side up. And that's cheating, a proper jigsaw puzzle, but that's just how that website works. And the reason I've chosen that one is it's the one that Friends of Greenfield Village uses. See, Friends of Greenfield Village is a great group on Facebook, and they have great photographs from the Historical Museum, Greenfield Village. And so they post occasionally, they'll post a really good one to this puzzle website. And if you go there, links are in the show notes, they're fun to do, but they're right side up. If you've got a real jigsaw puzzle, I don't know if our friend in Dexter is watching tonight, but she is a jigsaw fanatic, or fan. I guess fan is short for fanatic. So that doesn't sound any less insulting. I'm a fanatic. I like the word fanatic, even though it's kind of implies fanaticism. Point is, if you've got them, play them. Links, again, are in the show notes, both to information about John Spilsbury, the cartographer who invented jigsaw puzzles, and Friends of Greenfield Village. 2 birthdays to celebrate today.
Who is this?
One of the greatest business women that I know. She's worth $3.5 billion.
Yes, she is.
The great Oprah Winfrey.
You get a rational philosophy. You get a rational philosophy. You get a rational philosophy.
That's right.
Well, she didn't say that. What she meant was, I think, with the Grand Am at the time, I believe that they were giving away.
Whatever you think of afternoon television and talk shows, if there's a way to do it right, or at least a way to do it well, she did it. She was the best.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is she still doing that? I don't know.
No, she's not. I think
she's 69 years old. She's worth $3.5 billion.
I think she's just kind of giving interviews and enjoying her wealth, which she earned.
Yeah. And one sign that she is a freethinker is that she's been with her partner Stedman forever, but they've never gotten married. They've said there was just no need to get married. They're totally devoted to each other, and they have. They've been together for decades. It reminds me of Goldie Hawn, who with Kurt Russell has been together and devoted and faithful. Just didn't see any need. Now, you know that I'm a champion of marriage. Love the institution of marriage.
Yay.
But I also think it's great that, if Oprah decided that marriage was not the right form for her relationship,
yeah,
but she could still be totally devoted, More
Yeah.
power to her. So happy birthday. Happy 78th birthday to Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah, the last thing she
No,
did
excuse
was...
me, 69th birthday. I'm skipping ahead of it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The last thing she did in 2021 was she conducted an interview with Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, and her husband, Prince Harry.
Meghan and Harry.
Yeah. That's another story.
That sounds right to me. The queen of
Yeah.
afternoon television,
Yes.
interviewing the Duchess and whatever Harry is. Prince Harry?
I
I
think.
assume. You can tell how much I don't.
Yeah, Prince Harry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Prince Harry. I mean, I in some ways I feel for them because, they're going through a lot just because of, how, where Harry was born and what conditions, but at the same time they have immense opportunity for their own lives. And so I hope that they enjoy their lives.
Good. I'm just looking at the chat here. Jennifer Leinberger is saying The Raven was about his dying wife, Virginia. I'm surprised about that because he was still pretty young when he wrote that. But yeah, maybe Lenore was inspired by his wife. I have not seen that, but if Jennifer says it, it is probably true. So very good. The other birthday I want to celebrate today is Thomas William Selleck. Yes, Tom Selleck is the one who's 78 years old today. And he's one of those people I admire because he ain't young, but he's still working. Still acting, still doing his thing, still good at it. Favorite Tom Selleck television show or movie? Tell us in the chat, but I think you all know, because I've said it before, it's Quigley Down Under. Because it was his chance to be in a movie, do something very different than what he usually does, and star with Alan Rickman. So, if you haven't seen Quigley Down Under, and if you have at all any shine whatsoever for Tom Selleck,
Oh, yeah.
that's the movie to see.
Tom Selleck, what a nice actor.
What a guy.
Yeah.
He is.
Actually, I want to see more Tom Selleck movies. That
We
would be
should do
really
that.
nice.
We should
Oh,
do
by
that.
the way, Jennifer is right.
Yeah?
You're
Good.
always right, Jennifer. Yeah, it says his marriage to his 13-year-old cousin, Virginia, and her untimely death 7 years later, when she was only 20, is credited to inspiring The Raven. Despite its popularity, Poe only ever made $9 from the poem, the original amount paid to him by the magazine. Ugh.
That's so crazy. But at the same time, you hear that a lot. Before people have any fame or clout, their early contracts are invariably not good ones.
Yeah.
But, that is part of later making it big. That's why you can't afford to just be a one-hit wonder. And Apollo Zeus does point out, we're broadcasting from Motown. We are just outside Detroit. And Tom Selleck was born in Detroit, Michigan. So there you go, another reason for...
We live just outside of Detroit, and we're not mugged or murdered. FYI.
Well, not usually. Not most days. Detroit, where the weak are killed and eaten.
No, not anymore.
Yes, well, sometimes. But we're careful. We try to be a little bit careful.
Well, all cities have problems.
All cities have problems.
And it's not the downtown area that has problems. It's the outlying areas of Detroit.
Yes. Yeah, we've all got our south side or whatever version of that you have.
West side.
Yeah, in Detroit, it's really just the ring around the city. Mm-hmm. If you get a mile outside of downtown, but you're still in Detroit. Anyway, without getting too much into that, we have one more thing on this date. I'm going to try to make this one quick today. Don't I always say that? But happy Freethinkers Day.
Yay! Everybody, think freely.
Think freely. That's my theme for the day. It's by the old calendar. You got to acknowledge that up front. But the reason why it's Freethinkers Day is by the old calendar, January 29th, is Thomas Paine Day. So it's Thomas Paine's birthday, his birth date on the Julian calendar. And I've linked in the show notes to Thomas Paine's writings and why today is considered to be Freethinkers Day. And that'll connect to everything else that we talk about today. First, What are we listening to this week?
Well, before we do that,
Yes.
I just have a nice quote from Thomas Paine.
Yes.
He said, "The real man smiles in trouble, gathers strength from distress, and grows brave by reflection."
Yes.
That's a really nice perspective.
I like that.
I like that.
Sounds like it could have been Benjamin Franklin or taken from the poem If. So, very
There you
good.
are. Yeah, and by the way, I think Ayn Rand's quote, just a 3-word quote, if you can guess it, that encourages free thinking, if it, as it were, is check your premises.
Check your premises, yes.
Yes.
That's always good advice.
Yes.
Jennifer says, Thomas Paine was cool. Absolutely. Absolutely right. Oh, my Facebook notes are hidden here. And Jim Ashley is in Facebook, and I'm actually going to reference him shortly. So I got to make sure that, it was 64 when Strangelove came out. Years before you were born. And I was 1 year old. That would have been probably too young to see that movie.
Yeah. You remember that movie.
Yes. Now, as far as what we're listening to this week, I did a couple of shows. I did an episode, part of it in black and white, which was fun, called Here Is the News. We did part 2 of our, James Valiant and I did part 2 of our parenting series, and more on that is coming up. I have been listening to, and Amy recommended this over the last couple of weeks, Mel Brooks' autobiography, All About Me. My remarkable life in show business, and I can second Amy's recommendation. It's very well written and very well presented.
Yes.
So if you have access to Audible, the Amazon book service, Audible, it's on there, and it's good.
Yeah, don't read the book, listen to it.
You could buy the book and read it, but hearing Mel Brooks relay these stories, it's really well done. Mm-hmm. You mentioned 3 words about first-hand thought. The first 3 words I thought of were think for yourself. Mm-hmm. One of the first George Harrison written songs on a Beatles album.
Yes.
Think for yourself, 'cause I won't be there with you. If you know the song at all, it's interesting because the thing that stands out in that song is the fuzz bass. It sounds like there's a really fuzzy electric guitar playing throughout the song, but it's actually the bass guitar. Paul McCartney is playing it through a fuzz box, which you don't usually hear with bass. You hear bass guitar will sometimes have a certain amount of distortion or overdrive added to it, but no, this is fuzz. So, good song. Actually, I've linked to it in the show notes.
Nice.
Because you should be listening to more Beatles music. But, yes, think for yourself. Although your mind's opaque, try thinking more of just for your own sake.
It's funny. I was doing a little research and I looked up how to become a free thinker, and there's actually a WikiHow page dedicated
WikiHow. I love the old WikiHows. I didn't even realize they were still out there.
There are many of them.
Yeah, there's a wiki site, a how-to version of Wikipedia.
WikiHow.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, and there's steps. So follow these steps. If follow them, obey them, and follow them religiously.
Follow them religiously.
Become
Don't think, just
a free
follow.
thinker.
That's funny. Is it like short? Could you actually read the steps on WikiHow on how to be a free thinker?
Number 1, try to avoid joining groups of supposedly like-minded others.
Yes, avoid that bubble.
All right. 2, ditch the 24/7 cable satellite news cycle.
Oh my God, that's advice I've certainly given before.
Yes.
Because I know people who will leave CNN or Fox News on all day. Oh, brain killing.
Yeah. Number 3 is evaluate why you do certain things, especially if you feel like you're a people pleaser.
Good. Good.
4, become open-minded and question everything.
Question everything, even this advice.
Yes, exactly. And number 5, beware of authoritarianism. That's a good one.
Good.
6, learn basic logic. And I think also probably, I don't know if they're going to mention if you have, what the certain logical fallacies are and biases, things like that. And number 7, try to enjoy being a free thinker. Do not lecture others that you see who are not like you. So educate people whenever possible. However, it's good to have individuality. Woo! Individuality.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the question, your own beliefs. It brings to mind the Thomas Jefferson quote in a letter that he wrote to a nephew. He said, question with boldness even the existence of a God, Because if there be one, he must more approve of the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear.
Yes. And I also want to introduce a word of the day.
Word of the day.
This is a word of the day that I think that we should, that I don't think the right uses, but I think the left usually uses the word normalize.
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 Now they use it, in all sorts of different ways. Very interesting ways, though. But a lot of people who are kind of like in the self-help camp, they put together nice little posters, in nice fonts. Like this one, it says, normalize changing your opinion when presented with new information. That's a nice one. Like normalize starting over as many times as you need. Okay, very good. But yeah, I want to put together a series of normalized quotes for myself, and maybe putting together some t-shirts with those quotes on it. Like, normalize taking ideas seriously. Normalize friendly conversations. That's an interesting one, especially for people who are not very gregarious or extroverted. And of course, normalize questioning authority. It's just fun. It's fun, especially in the context of, when the left comes out with some crazy, authoritarian mindset of, okay, we all have to force whatever our beliefs are on you now. Otherwise, you are some horrible person. And you're going to just not question what we say. You're just going to accept it. But it's fun to take, the words of the left and to spin them around and make them rational. So I would say that says normalize taking words from the left and making them rational.
Yes. Jennifer says, is that like caramelize?
Yeah.
I think we're catching her at dinner time here. I love that idea of normalize.
Yeah.
Changing your mind with new information. It brings to mind the Winston Churchill quote. Winston Churchill once said to a woman who berated him for changing his opinion, "When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, madam?" So, very, very Winston Churchill. But yes, we should certainly normalize changing our mind when we have new information or simply realize that we were wrong.
And here's another Thomas Paine quote that's along these lines. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. So yes, don't be in the habit of not questioning your ideas.
Yes, Paula Zeus in the chat says, what's the connection and or difference between free thinking and the virtue of independence in objectivism?
Well, I think that Ayn Rand may have not liked the vagueness of the term free thinking, and that's how some people kind of see that as skepticism.
Yes.
Where
exactly
you can't
right.
know anything at all, and everything's subjective, and hey, everything can mean everything or nothing, if whatever you feel. Yeah.
Yes, and Ayn Rand mentions in Atlas Shrugged, you have Dr. Robert Stadler, back when he still had integrity, made the point that the expression free, honest inquiry is a redundancy. Mm-hmm. Before he endorsed the State Science Institute, to be free is to be honest.
Right.
That is rational thinking, first-handed thinking.
Yeah.
Ayn Rand said of independence is the recognition of the fact that yours is the responsibility of judgment, and nothing can help you escape it, that no substitute can do your thinking, as no pinch hitter could live your life. The vilest form of self-abasement, self-destruction, is the subordination of your mind to the mind of another, the acceptance of an authority over your brain, the acceptance of his assertions as facts, his say-so as truth, his edicts as a middleman between your consciousness and your existence. So we are talking about the same thing, and so that's why I had that quote ready to go. So you are right to raise that Apollo Zeus.
Yeah, Jim over on Facebook, he says, I'll ask Peter Keating for advice on how to think for myself. He'd be good for that, I think.
Yes, he would. He'd be an expert. Absolutely. Because he you learn by doing the opposite. So now I was going to mention Jim because Jim posted earlier on Facebook. Let's see, where did I write? Oh, he posted under the title of On the Occasion of Freethinkers Day. Jim had a very good quote from the film Inherit the Wind. Henry Drummond is saying, I know what Bert is going through. It's the loneliest feeling in the world. It's like walking down an empty street, listening to the sound of your own footsteps. But all you have to do is knock on any door and say, well, if you let me in, I'll live the way you want me to live. And I'll think the way you want me to think. And all the blinds will go up and all the doors will open and you'll never, ever be lonely again. It brings to mind the character of Howard Rourke, which, of course, is the antipode of that in The Fountainhead.
Yeah, the quote on that...
I've got it right here.
Oh, good.
We're thinking of all the same things, too.
Yes.
He walked swiftly with a loose, lazy expertness of motion. He walked down the long road in the sun. Henry Drummond is saying, it's like walking down an empty street. People turned to look at Howard Rourke as he passed. Some remained staring after him with sudden resentment. They could give no reason for it. It was an instinct his presence awakened in most people. Howard Rourke saw no one. For him, the streets were empty. He could have walked there naked without concern.
Well, actually, I was thinking about Peter Keating.
Oh, yes. What do you have on Peter Keating there?
Well, it's I don't have the full scene in front of me, just the one quote. But they're sitting there talking, I think, on the front porch of Peter Keating's mother's house.
Right. Keating goes to Rourke for advice.
Yes.
He's like, come on, Howard, what should I do? Should I go to the Beaux Arts to impress the yokels?
Yeah, or should I work with Francon?
Francon, because I can work my way up there. Not that I respect the guy at all.
And Howard Rourke says, if you want my advice, Peter, you've made a mistake already by asking me, by asking anyone. Never ask people, not about your work. Don't you know what you want? How can you stand it not knowing? How can you stand it not thinking for yourself, Peter?
Really?
Yeah. I think, Peter Keating in that context is somebody who does not have a habit of thinking for himself, and Howard Rourke knows this. Now, if it were somebody that you trusted, a trusted friend or colleague or whatever, and you want to get advice about your career, sure, ask them. But in this case, it's just not appropriate because Peter Keating's just asking everybody and anybody, and I guess taking a consensus, I suppose, and he's not really getting to the questions of what he wants to do because he's already asked himself that, and his answer is not architecture. But his mom wanted him to go into it, but he wanted to be an artist. So he already knows that he doesn't want either assignment. And, Yeah, he's
not asking for advice based on his values. It's one thing to go to somebody who's an expert and say, look, here's what I think. Here's what matters to me. Here's what my priorities are. Do you have any advice? I should have thought to put a link in the show notes, but I'm sure you can find it. The Ayn Rand Institute, ARI, did an episode of New Ideal Live in which they discussed, what about experts? What's a rational way to take advice? Now, in this context, it was medical advice in the middle of the COVID pandemic. But what is a rational perspective with regard to experts and expertise? Mm-hmm. And you could search for that and find that. But in honor of Thomas Paine's birthday and Freethinkers Days, I want to do a couple more quick quotes from Thomas Paine from his letter and essay on the American Crisis. To General Sir William Howe, Thomas Paine wrote this: to argue with a man who has renounced the use and authority of reason, and whose philosophy consists in holding humanity in contempt, is like administering medicine to the dead. Or, endeavoring to convert an atheist by Scripture. Enjoy, sir, your insensibility of feeling and reflecting it is the prerogative of animals. And no man will envy you these honors, in which a savage only can be your rival and a bear your master. The voice of reason. Elsewhere he said, a thing moderately good is not so good as it ought to be. Moderation in temper is always a virtue, but moderation in principle is always a vice. Which always makes me think of the line in The Scarlet Pimpernel,
Mm-hmm.
when his tailor is saying, oh, it's not so bad. Nothing is so bad as something that is not so bad.
I love it.
So yes, from Thomas Paine, a thing moderately good is not so good as it ought to be. Moderation in temper is always a virtue, but moderation in principle is always a vice. That from Thomas Paine.
Oh, here's another great short quote from Thomas Paine. Reason obeys itself, and ignorance submits to whatever is dictated to it.
Yes.
That's I love those little different perspectives on rationality,
Yes.
on in independent thought. And also I want to do is normalize, just normalize talking about ideas. It's gotten to the point just a little anecdote from work. I have a couple of coworkers who will remain completely anonymous, and I was talking to one, and we were talking about Rosa Parks, and it was just a kind of a factual disagreement. We had thought, both of us, as opposed to a third coworker who was there, we had thought that it was kind of a spontaneous thing that Rosa Parks decided to stay seated on the bus, and that it wasn't something that she had, herself personally planned. And I've seen interviews with her talking about it. And so my coworker and I looked at each other and said, "Yeah, that is right." And then the third coworker came up, and he said, "No, that's wrong. Actually, it was planned. She had planned it, and there was a whole group of people that she was a part of who planned it. And it turns out we were both right. There was a group that planned it that she was privy to, and so the thought or the idea was out there, but it wasn't specifically out there for her to stay seated. So it was just interesting because it's like, don't get upset about it. Let's find out. And so I went ahead and I sent them my findings later on. And but it's like, yeah, let's talk about ideas. Let's not be squirrely about it. Let's not be squeamish about it. Let's not think that, we're going to offend somebody. If you're wrong, then that's fine. You have an opportunity to say, here is the correct information. And that's good. I think everybody should come at ideas with a perspective of normalizing changing your opinion when presented with new information. That definitely should be more in the mainstream right now in our culture. And we need to insert that into our culture more often so y'all know what to do.
Yes, normalize the primacy of existence. Facts come first.
Yes, absolutely.
How you feel about it, what it does for your argument, how it affects your self-esteem or your standing in your social group.
Or, oh no, somebody's going to think poorly of me for actually asking about an idea.
Yes.
No. You all should be praising each other for that.
And changing your mind? Oh my gosh, that would be terrible. Heaven forbid. Thinking. Really thinking. Thinking can lead you to a vast, almost wild range of conclusions. But so long as you are committed to rational, first-handed, independent thought, even if you err, you have the means to find the right path again. You know, as with all ambitions, it's okay to stumble and fall and fail. As long as you never give up, never surrender, always be willing to pick up the reins again. Yes, it looks like Gangsta Paddington is in the house. I hear rap music starting to play.
Fuzzy bear rap music.
Jim says in the chat, Peter's mental focus was forever on the wrong thing, his mother's approval. Without that, he would feel lost, until and unless he decided to reject the idea that her approval and even her love was of life or death importance. That was certainly the start of his journey into second-handedness. And he lived his whole life that way. It's funny. Well, funny. It's not funny. It's interesting when people will say, in The Fountainhead, Ayn Rand was so unfair to Peter Keating. Later in life, he wanted to be an artist, and he started painting. And he shows his paintings to Howard Rourke, and he, apparently he was just getting started. Couldn't Rourke have been encouraging? And couldn't, with enough time, couldn't he have been a painter? Couldn't he have done that? And Rourke looks at what Keating is doing and says, I'm sorry, it's too late. Well, what was going on there wasn't, he didn't develop the technique, he didn't develop the brush strokes, he didn't develop the skills to paint soon enough for Rourke to say, yeah, there's a chance for you to be a painter. The point is, and it's made clear in that passage, there was nothing on the canvases. There was no meaning in any of it. Keating had no passion left. He had nothing left to say. He had sold out, as Jim points out, right from his early days with his mother. But at every step of his career, by the time he was done, there was nothing left of him. It's why he's finally willing to acknowledge, a spoiler alert for The Fountainhead if anyone hasn't read it yet, but he's finally willing to acknowledge Ellsworth Toohey is the bad guy. And he, helps Howard Rourke, and yet he still betrays him and still says, Ellsworth, don't go. There's nothing left of Keating. So that even as he tries to maintain this friendship with Howard Rourke and shows him his paintings and says, what do you think? There's nothing there.
I mean, I liked the quote from Thomas Paine about a long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right, which is he never questioned his reliance on other people's judgment, and he never questioned his never starting to habitualize his own independent thinking. So, I mean, as an artist, what do you do as an artist? Yeah, you can draw pretty trees and landscapes and things like that if you want. But I mean, as an artist, what do? You are stylizing everything that you are seeing. You are using your independent judgment for every little thing, every little brushstroke and color and composition and everything that you put in your painting, or everything you put in your song or whatever it is. I mean, you want to make it as much of your vision as possible, as independent as possible, and as unique as possible. So yeah, it's that long habitualized, what do other people think of me? That key. I think that really is the key to Peter Keating not being able to be an artist at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's worth rereading those passages because it sounds like, the story is rather harsh with Keating. Apollo Zeus asked, well, he could have kept art as a hobby on the side, though.
He could have.
And the answer to that is there was nothing in it for Keating either. If you read those passages again, she describes Keating, out looking at a lake or wherever it was outdoors that he was painting. And she said he couldn't say that he got any pleasure from the activity, just that there was a certain solace that came from it. And it's, essentially that leftover sense of that's what he should have been doing. Yeah. So he could have kept it as a hobby, but it brought him no joy. He didn't get happiness from it. Again, reread those passages. I think Rand makes it clear it wasn't that he was rediscovering something from his youth and he could pick it up and at least get a little pleasure from it, because there wasn't even that. Again, this is a man who has sacrificed everything, and it's not that he's angry and bitter, it's just that he's an empty shell. And that happens. There's only so many, months, years, decades that you can live as a hollow shell with no real values.
Yeah, Ian in the chat on YouTube says Keating and Wynand are both super sad characters.
Very tragic.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about, Ayn Rand was so capable. She had such a range of presenting, such a range of emotional presentation in presenting her characters. So good. So good.
Yes. Yes, yes. So, last month in December 15th, I did an episode of Life on Earth with Robert Nasir on the ARC UK channel entitled Major Announcement, Everything's Going to Be All Right. That was fun. I did that the same day as the former president's major announcement.
You mean aliens were not landing?
Aliens were not landing. And I want to leave you today with that same major announcement. And this is a declaration. And if it sounds ungrounded or baseless, you're going to have to watch that episode for the full justification. But this is a product of my own first-hand, independent thinking. This was the announcement, and it's as true today as it was then. You are beautiful and worthy of love, and the vast majority of those you will ever meet are good, reasonable, decent people, and everything's going to be all right. I believed it when I said it on December 15th. I still believe it. All of the evidence adds up to that conclusion. Not that all of the evidence points in that direction. There's certainly some evidence out there that some of us are facing challenges that make us less than beautiful sometimes. And there's certainly evidence out there that some of the people you meet aren't great people. And there's certainly evidence out there that some things aren't going to be all right. But when I add it all up, and I mean add it all up, and look at the lives of the people I know, and the lives of the people I read about, including the good news and the bad news out there, as I discussed in my episode Here is the News, I can't reach any other conclusion based on my own I may be wrong. You can tell me I'm wrong. Some folks have already told me I'm wrong. But as best I can tell, you are beautiful and worthy of love. And the vast majority of those you will ever meet are good, reasonable, decent people, and everything's going to be all right. And with that said, my Post-it note of the week. I said this earlier, so it was a bit of a tease. My Post-it note of the week just says, this is not a dress rehearsal. I think that's all that needs to be said about that one, right?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it before. Yeah, this is not a dress rehearsal. And
we are all time travelers, but unfortunately it's forward only
right.
and 360 seconds an hour.
That's very true.
There's no rewind button.
Yeah, so Jim in the Facebook chat, he says, someone once said to me that Ayn Rand's characters were, quote, two-dimensional. I don't know why they had that idea. Do either of you?
Oh, absolutely.
I have an idea. What's your theory?
Well, I think yours was the same as mine. It came up on Twitter just the other day. Somebody was saying, I read Atlas Shrugged, and there's only one character in that whole book who has any character development at all. And I thought, well, I hope they're talking about Henry Reardon, because right. His development at least is obvious.
Right.
But there's so much character development. Now, Amy, you actually did a talk on The Fountainhead, in which you discussed Howard Rourke's mistakes.
Yes. There are so many.
Now, Howard Rourke at the beginning of The Fountainhead is the ideal man, but that doesn't mean he's perfect.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that he knows everything he needs to do to not make any mistakes. Like, at least when it comes to architecture, he says to Gail Wynand says, oh, I remember, they're on the yacht, or before they get on the yacht, and Howard Rourke says, yeah, I'd like to take a vacation. I've been doing lousy work lately. And Gail whines says, oh, do you ever do lousy work? And Howard Rourke says, more of it than most architects and with less excuse. My only claim is that my botches end up in my own wastebasket.
Yeah.
So yes, Howard Rourke makes, and you did a whole talk on that.
Oh, yeah.
On the things.
I mean, I'd love to compile that, but just off the top of my head, I mean, the fact that he helped Peter Keating, that was a huge one.
By the end of the story, he acknowledges that was a mistake. I should not have helped you
mistake.
from the beginning.
And then also, the Sanford home, he made some mistakes there. He kind of, he a lot of it was all of it was honest error. He was still trying to understand people. He was trying to understand who he could trust, who he could work with, who would be reliable, who would be honest. So yeah, he corrected all of his mistakes. The Sanford house, though, actually, he had to use his own money to. He ended up taking a loss on that home.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many mistakes that he made in there. I would love to, and also I did list out all the mistakes that the protagonists in Atlas Shrugged made. Of course, Hank Rearden made a lot of them, but Dagny made some, and it's none of them are like mistakes of evasion in that sense, because they never became habitualized. They learned from them, and they used their mistakes as a source of knowledge. So yeah, they were honest with themselves. But yeah, it's interesting to see all of the things that happened. So much character development in The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. As far as people, I think we have a little bit of a difference because I think people who are not freethinkers will read The Fountainhead, for instance. They might relate more to Peter Keating or Gail Wynand, and say, the outcome was not fair to them. And they have a certain kind of sense of life affinity for characters like that because they are not questioning their own beliefs. And they're not thinking in terms of their own motivations or how ideas and philosophy structure and influence a person's actions and thoughts. They don't see that. And of course, if you don't see that, you're not going to get Ayn Rand's characters.
Yeah, what's missing in Ayn Rand's books, Jim, and anybody else who's pondered that question of why do people say Ayn Rand's characters don't have depth? They're not neurotic, in the sense of they're not neurotically senseless. They don't have psychopathological issues. Even the ones who obviously have issues, you can see that they're moral issues. There's nobody who's just, got fatal flaws and he can't help it. There's nobody who's got that kind of weakness. The people who are weak because they're morally weak. And the people who read Ayn Rand's books are wondering, well, where are the damaged people? Through no fault of their own. They're just kind of crazy, or they're just, kind of wicked, or they've just got issues. And there's nothing senseless in Ayn Rand's stories. There's plenty of good, and there's plenty of evil. And there's even people who are enormously mixed. Think of the 5 main characters in The Fountainhead. Think of the progression of Dominique from the beginning to the end of the story, but especially the 4 men. Ayn Rand has said that, again, spoiler alert, but in Howard Rourke, you've got the ideal man. The man who was great and knew that he was great. In Gail Wynand, you've got the man who should have been great, but did not know it and didn't make it happen. You've got Peter Keating, the man who could never be great, but didn't know it. And you've got Ellsworth Toohey, the man who will and could never be a great man, but he knows it. This is a complexity of characters that plays out in 1,000 different ways. So anybody like me would come in and say, this is so interesting and so compelling and so much to learn from each of these people.
Yes.
But wait, where's the guy with like that fatal flaw? Where's the neurotic guy? Where's the weak guy? Where's the sniveling guy? Where's the person with OCD? Where's there's just none of that.
In other words, all of them have made choices. Every character, good and bad and mixed, have made choices. And that free will is a major part of your life. But
where's the murderer who's that way because of the village he grew up in and the kind of people he was surrounded by? And it wasn't really his fault, but it also was.
The only person that's closest to that is Philip Reardon. He went to college. He studied, I don't know, whatever, sociology or something along those lines. And yeah, he became a creep just by inertia.
Yeah.
I mean,
He probably wouldn't qualify in the eyes of these folks because he's still a product of ideas and choices.
Yeah.
Versus just forces beyond his control.
Right.
What about, just like, normal folks?
And you see Paul Larkin, who is also kind of like that.
Yeah.
But at the very end, when when Hank is forced to give his business up, part of his business up to Paul Larkin, Paul's like, oh, don't look at me like that. I'll fulfill my end of the bargain. Don't look at me. Don't judge me. And then, of course, he does not fulfill his end of the bargain. Yeah. Of course he doesn't. But yeah, it's anyway. There's just so much depth. We could talk for hours on one character of one of those books.
But it's not the kind of depth that they're looking for.
No.
They're looking for the kind of character study that you see in Dostoevsky. Or even Hugo. Just ramble on about, just build a story that's, more journalistic.
Right.
Or just blah, 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 blah. And it can be interesting, and I don't mean to begrudge writers who do that. That's not Ayn Rand's thing. People say, why didn't Ayn Rand have children? Because she liked children. She was fine with children, but it wasn't her thing.
Yeah.
Why didn't she write stories more like, other writers who would write long and intense and very personal? And why couldn't she be more like Jane Austen and create these characters with, like you might actually meet walking down the street?
Yeah, and there's there's the other perspective where Ayn Rand really respected the intelligence of her audience.
Yes.
Really because she just didn't let you get off easy with Howard Rourke, especially, for instance. She doesn't say Howard Rourke said indignantly, Howard Rourke said angrily, Howard Rourke said happily, Howard Rourke said joyously. No adverbs
yes.
in that. She is painting him almost in a mysterious way, like a mystery, a psychological mystery to solve within the book. And you can see by his actions, the way he reacts to other people, what his motivations are, what he's feeling at a certain time, the choice of his words. So no, Ayn Rand doesn't come out and just say, Howard Rourke is feeling this way right now if you don't know. No. She relied on specific words, actions, and responses from Howard Rourke to tell you what he's feeling. And you have to do the investigation on that, your own thinking and your own judgment. It's amazing.
Yeah, even when she shares a character's inner state, she doesn't tell you what to think of it.
Right.
Yeah. Jim says, it sounds like these people have read too much Shakespeare or Don Quixote multiple times. Yeah, I can see that. Incidentally, Linda Cordair chimed in, but they have no power where they're at in Wyoming.
We wish you much power,
She
Linda.
says, can't stay long, just wanted to say hi. So everybody should go to Cordair.com and say hi to Linda by browsing the Quint Cordair Fine Art website.
Yes.
Absolutely should do that. Well, that was my Post-it note. Again, this is not a dress rehearsal. Life is not a dress. That's cliche, but it's absolutely true. Life is not a dress rehearsal. So that's my advice for this week for myself. I've got that on a Post-it note. I will put that up there where I will remind me. And the reason is, as I say, it's 3 days till February. And the first month has kind of blown by. It was a great month. We had a great glow, a great dinner. We've been spending time with friends. It's not that the month was wasted, but, man, I got so much to do. So, join me in making the last few days outstanding.
Yes, and a couple quick things. I've got one quote by Thomas Paine I'll read, but before I do that, our good friend Paul, a.k.a. Mr. Halloween, he mentioned to me that during the live stream, if we don't stay on for a little bit, like a couple seconds longer, our last few words of what you're saying don't actually come through and they cut off.
Oh.
So before you say, after you say your last word, count a couple of seconds and then press the button. But anyway, so Thomas Paine says, to argue with a man who has renounced the use and authority of reason and whose philosophy consists in holding humanity in contempt is like administering medicine to the dead or endeavoring to convert an atheist by scripture.
Yes, that's the quote I read at the beginning of the show.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I think I remember that now.
Well, I think you were reading people's comments while I was reading quotes.
Yes.
It's a complicated production here. Yeah, well, we could, at the end of the show, we could do closing music. We could do a closing theme. We could, put the title card up here. See, look at that. Could make that happen. Or come up with something far more clever than that.
Good.
But with that said, thank you for joining us. As always, we wish you every success, all of the happiness you so richly deserve. If you have any suggestions for this show, for things we should discuss, things we should do differently, how we should handle those closing seconds of the show to make sure that we don't get cut off, let us know. Share them in the chat. Share them in the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, Amy Nasir Facebook group. Go to robertnasir.com. You'll see links to the group there. If you want to support the show materially, you know what to do. At robertnasir.com, you'll see links to our Patreon, where you can make a small, less than the price of a cup of coffee, or massive if you want, monthly contribution to the show, or a one-time contribution through PayPal. Both of those links are at robertnasir.com. And with that said, we didn't keep it under 5 minutes, but we kept it under an hour. Thank you for joining us, especially to all of you in the chat. Part of my favorite part of the show is just reading the comments in the chat. What's the name of Haley's opera where Icarus gets to the sun? Well, that's a great question, which is not really part of Atlas Shrugged. But I don't think it had a name. Oh, now I know the reference you're talking about. I don't know that it had a name. I don't know. We'll have to answer that next week. We'll just have to answer that one next week.
Great question.
I could bring up the Ayn Rand research CD, which I have on one of these machines here. That's right. Not going to waste your time. I shouldn't say waste. It's a great question. I'm not going to take the time right now to do that. What I'm going to do is wish you an outstanding evening / day / afternoon, depending on where in the world you are. I have to remember that, we are on all four corners of the square globe. How do we end up with four corners? Anyway, thank you for joining us. We will be back next Sunday with another episode of 5 Minutes, with Robert and Amy Nasir. And I'll also see you this week on the ARC UK. We didn't even talk about the curious things that are happening there. Maybe next week. And I think that's it. Mm-hmm. That's it. Why are you still here? What? Because we didn't finish wishing you happiness and success and flourishing. And as always, and February 14th is right around the corner, we wish you love.